else, the DiCE coordinator. I'm part of Johnson & Johnson. With the amazing DiCE team, we have been collaborating for nearly 4 years now. So what you will see today is a bit of a combination of all the work we have been doing together. Today, I'm not alone because we are also clustering several very closely related projects. One is Increase, also going in the final stages where they have been looking at increasing circular economy for electronics. So very happy to welcome you here as well. And of course, we also have IHI on core project here today as well. That started last year. It's a public-private partnership between medtech companies, pharma companies, and wide academic partners as well. With them, we have been already exchanging quite a lot over the last year on how any DiCE to increase results could also scale through that network as well. So what's the storyline for today? This morning, we will start first with some of the key outcomes and learnings from DiCE, which will be presented by Satya. Then we will give the floor to Increase to showcase how recycled plastics can be used in digital home care products as well, which may sound easier than it is because there's a lot of course issues involved. And then we will go through the scaling from DiCE to core, and Stefania, Marco, and Mariana will be presenting that as well. After that, we will have a short Q&A, and then we will move to coffee break. Actually, I should move the agenda forward here as well. So coffee break at 11, and after that, we will engage in a more informal discussion around policy. First, we will present some of the regulatory challenges that we have observed through DiCE and also best practices that could be leveraged across the different member states in Europe. Very timely because we know that the Commission is now looking at the Circular Economy Act, which is expected to come out in Q3, Q4 of this year. So any recommendations we can still provide, hopefully, can guide that as well. So Sonia will be identifying and highlighting the system barriers that we have observed and the recommendations based on pilots that we have run. And then we will end it with a panel discussion and see how we can then look forward and make circular devices more impactful. We will close at 10 to 1 with some conclusions and next steps. So we will do a wrap-up of the panel discussion altogether. And after that, the people who are here in the room are more than welcome to join us for networking lunch. So please stay tuned for that. And then after that, thank you for joining, and hopefully a lot of learnings that you can take forward.
Innovation in healthcare has enabled great progress, but this progress has increased the generation of electronic waste, so-called e-waste.
Digital health devices is complex because of the added challenge of potential biological and chemical contamination, as these devices are usually incinerated and disposed of in landfill.
This means a loss of valuable materials such as lithium, titanium, and other metals and plastics, which are increasingly in demand for producing new electronic devices and other products.
The DiCE project has been created to address these challenges. It aims to extend the lifetime of digital healthcare devices by developing and piloting solutions across the whole product lifecycle.
DiCE uses 6 products as case studies: an endocutter used in hospitals for stapling in surgery, an ECG lead sensor, digital display label, an on-body drug delivery system, a smart pill box, and the medical sensor used by patients at home.
The project examines and develops circular design processes, including strategies to enable maximum use life of the product and maximize the recovery of the materials that will be used.
The project is also developing motivational strategies to optimize the collection of these devices, working with citizens and healthcare professionals to understand what motivates them to handle and dispose of end-of-use devices correctly.
These innovations will be tested and demonstrated with 3 European healthcare ecosystems through engaged pilots
The result of DiCE will be a replicable model for healthcare, as well as adjacent industries that enable a significant gain from a fragmented and linear take-make waste business model towards a circular and sustainable one, allowing the reuse of products and recovery of components and raw materials.
To date, its progress and results register as a DiCE stakeholder.
So with that, the most difficult technological challenge is over. And I would like to invite Sonia to
Sorry. He did not keep on going.
Now we will go. Okay, good morning and thank you for joining us in this important event to us. It's a pleasure to meet some of you again, and there are some new faces. We will have time during the conference for more networking, of course. And now I would like to introduce to you, it's a challenge, and please tell me with the timekeeping. Because we want to present the outcomes and lasting learnings, because we are almost at the end of the project. We're not there yet, but we are we're going to show what we produced so far and also what is coming soon. With this, so you saw in the video a bit of summary on how what the scope is and how far we want to go. The ambition of our project is high, and basically during the design of the project, the life cycle approach was very important, considering the steps since the design. So where we are now, we have been working during the last years on the key design steps for improving the circularity of medical devices. So this bases on studies, full-fledged work on environmental, social, economic, circularity assessments of the solutions that we have been working on. Then we have the products, we have designed them. Very important is also to see how to improve the collection, because we understood since the beginning that low collection rates are hindering the optimal circularity in our processes, in our cases. But not only that, it's important in terms of systematic approach, but also the motivational strategies, how to nudge, how to convince, how to engage the actors in returning the devices. And the third step is applying a reverse logistics approach, meaning, okay, now the facilities or the key actors receiving or going to receive the materials or the devices can optimally introduce the reverse logistics in a sustainable way. There are processes, we will introduce them in a bit. It's about all the options that we have studied and we are now presenting, which need to be considered for optimal circularity, we would say, in other systems. And at last but not least, the business models assessment and regulations. It's very important, because without the naming conditions, this cannot be successful. So based on that, starting with one of the first, say, outcomes, because it was already produced earlier in the project, we will not be able to read it, I'm sure. But what I want to highlight is that the authors at TU Delft that were leading this work described, I counted 12 options, circular strategy options for achieving the highest value, starting with the refuse option: replace, rethink, reduce, maintain, repair, reuse, refurbish, remanufacture, repurpose, and recycle. So these are all the options that you can find, and the pathways are described, nicely described when you have a zooming option in this very important graphic. So if you can recall a bit, you know the Ellen MacArthur butterfly, this is a kind of adaptation that is specific for the digital health devices.
So this is published. You can have the paper online available now. Based on that, the circular design guidelines follows the steps from definition of the challenges towards the framing the question, stipulation, options that need to be identified, and then at the end, so understanding the impacts of the solutions that are proposed. So these 9 guidelines under development. And yesterday I was in the Increase project where they launched the design work and eco-design and guideline, and I think you call it playbook as well. So we need to be very specific in order to maximize the output and the value of the solutions. This will be published in the end of September. So we are almost there and you will see it online, of course. On the reverse logistics plans that is being developed by our colleagues and the forum leadership, Maria is here, you can talk to her if you have questions. This aims to improve the collection of the products and optimize the needs. And this is very interesting based on the principles that have been established. The principles are health and safety of value chain actors, individuals along the value chain, preserving the value, compliance, of course, with regulations, traceability, it's about information, data, collaboration among the actors, and efficiency. No, what we are always looking for now, more and more, we need to simplify to make it efficient, to make it happen as process, to make it doable. So there are different models that have been assessed, and said it's not now the time for assessing each of them. We have the reuse-oriented systems for non-infective products that were assessed as a model, but also the controlled healthcare waste pathways to give you samples. So this is the deliverable that is going to be published soon. And another study that was another case pilot that was conducted was assessing these 4 scenarios for the ECG lead sets. And there, maybe you can see in the graphic more clearly the options. I explained the R's that we have identified. One of them is in the first option. Well, this is the actually not an R option, the single use scenario that was compared with the other options. Direct reuse, meaning when the ECG lead sets were reused in the hospital directly, of course, after cleaning, after proper procedures. Then the third scenario is about local processing, meaning there is a specialized unit in the hospital, the healthcare center, so where you the devices undergo treatments, additional treatments with people that are skilled for that. And there we had the pilots in the hospitals, as you can see there, with a number of stakeholders interviewed. I mentioned this because this is similar to what ENCORE is conducting. For example, they will explain the case. And the fourth scenario is about specialized reprocessing when you send the devices outside. So there is an external actor there doing the reprocessing. So these scenarios were compared and the results are also very enlightening, and learnings were taken up when analyzing the reports. So this is this was on the ECG lead set. Now on the confirmatory pilot. What it is, it was about testing or understanding the return behavior, but also designing a way that we have nudging strategies for comparing, for understanding what the best strategies will be, and a collection beam was designed for that purpose. And we have an actor that is in Norway, Green, that designed specifically for this project the collection bin that you see on the right in the picture, that allows you to leave there, dispose of there, the used devices that were part of this pilot. We have these pillboxes, the smart pillboxes, and I don't know if that's clear to all of you what it means. These are no, boxes for drugs, for pills that support adherence in patients. And they're smart because they are electronic pill boxes. And we had also the OVDS cases. So this main answering a number of questions, and the results are also being now processed and will be part of the final report. So this is the pilot, the confirmatory pilot cases that were conducted in 3 cities, in Spain, Valladolid, in Maribor, in Slovenia, and also in Gil, the Netherlands.
Belgium.
Sorry, Belgium. Apologies. Okay. We have the performance assessment. As I mentioned at the beginning, we along the project at 2 steps at least, the beginning and then at the end. This sustainability assessment was conducted, meaning integrating the environmental, economic, and social assessments, plus circularity assessment in order to understand the variations among the scenarios and products. And we will not see all the results, but what we can highlight here is first, there is no black and white result, meaning you don't have all the positive results just for one scenario. There are also trade-offs. Another highlight is that, for example, for products with reusable options or partial recycling, the circularity, which I think is very evident, well, is better in these cases. On the environmental aspect, we assessed the impacts, but in order to present today, because there are many numbers, the CO2 emissions, now the greenhouse gas emissions, were considered as a key indicator. And especially for those where you have more use of materials or single use, it's higher. It's a higher indicator, meaning more negative. And on the economic side, what is very interesting is that the care pathway was taken into account. What it means is not just having the device at the moment in use for the period of the treatment, it's also understanding the recovery, what it means for the patient having a device probably with more better quality or better functions. So this all was taken into account. So for example, if the adherence is not ensured, which is the case of the scenario that there is no use, the adherence is lower, then the patient is not recovering, or is recovering probably more slowly than if there was a tool like the smart pill box that would help following a proper treatment. So this kind of, I'm saying this example because it's easier, but this was considered for the products that are considered like the endocutter, like the ECG lead sets. This was a very interesting finding. Therefore, the economic impacts are different in these cases. So products with better functions would at the end mean less costs overall in the life cycle. On the social, what is also a highlight is that electronics, because of the content of critical materials or those with higher impacts along the value chain rate have scored less in this aspect, a specific aspect. But also another interesting aspect is the job creation, because with the situation of many components being now produced in other regions beyond Europe, so the job creation in Europe is less. This is also another factor that was taken into account. We're talking about the electronic components, for example. Well, this is a way to show how the trade-off could look like. And in summary, the lifetime extension, which is one indicator that is across was assessed across the options, rates better, of course, for reused devices, partially reused ones. Also, considering the cost, as you see, the life cycle costing was a tool applied, And then you see the overall cost along the patient care pathway is much more during the whole period of treatment, of recovery than during the production itself or during the treatment itself. So it's really a very interesting finding. Maybe because of time, I will run to the circularity dashboard. That is the next deliverable that we produce, and NASA is joining us and working on that. We'll gather all this information and we'll present in a nice tool that we are developing. Will include circularity indicators, environmental indicators, and economic ones. I presented more or less, already mentioned some of them, based on CO2 emissions, for example, or also on the circularity map, we will have the reuse and reprocessing activities in different countries, showing where this is happening and maybe the levels as well of circularity. This is not ready yet, but you will have this available at the end of the project. And finally, on the business models, there was an assessment of the possibilities of business models that take place in our value chains. And basically, we run them from the level of product service system, meaning who owns the products, who owns going from the customers to the manufacturers. So you have different models, and the leasing option is mentioned there, but also you have the responsibilities for circular activities. And there are two different, the ownership plus responsibilities, which vary. In this mapping, we can find ourselves depending on the healthcare system, the hospital, the manufacturer, how this works for each of the devices. And basically the findings are that let's not stick to one model. There are archetypes, and we should think of families. I mean, what is more convenient, what is talking more to our case, that is what we need to assess. Then according to the current enabling conditions, sustainability is not it's not the priority. The first one, economic drives adoption. We look for improving enabling conditions so that sustainability runs better. Of course, needs to be supported. Enabling conditions. And then we have that patients and actors would really need, like institution, the framework that enables that support circularity. It's not all the burden or all the work on them, on the individuals to return, to support circularity by purchases or selection of devices. It's not possible on them, but it's about institutions, the framework in the country and in the hospital. It depends on in the region that supports these processes. And overall regulations without alignment with the local conditions, local regulations, but also the regional ones and the sectoral ones, it's difficult to navigate. And this is what we will discuss in the second part of this session of this event today. With this, take a note that these educational trainings will be published as well, will be made available on operations for reprocessing, for circularity, for all these steps needed, nudging strategies, on sustainability assessment, and in circular design. We're working on that, and you should be able to receive them soon. Stay tuned, because as soon as we publish something, we communicate. Please don't miss the opportunity. And what is coming in future very soon, actually, is the DiCE policy recommendations, the business model implementation roadmap for the project, the curriculum and training materials as mentioned. The dashboard was already set, the industry design guide for circular design of health products, the reverse logistics plan, and divided for two groups. With this, I think I managed in time.
You did. Any questions for Sonia?
A question regarding, I'm not involved in all the details, but if you do a financial impact assessment, do you also translate the environmental impact into a financial impact? So like the CO2 emissions, you have the CO2 price and included into the financial ones?
If it's about the life cycle costing, the tool that we apply, no, it doesn't consider. So maybe, yeah.
I think this is quite important because if you think of in terms of buying, like a procurement in hospital, and you separate the environmental impact, you have kind of the CO2. What does it mean? So a procurement people will say, well, okay, has a higher emissions, and this product has a lower ones. But if the financial, if the price is the driving factor for procurement, and you have to include, for my opinion, the environmental impact into a financial number and include it into the price.
I agree, as a hard result, it's not in the calculations, but this is a recommendation that we need to include in our roadmap and final recommendations. That's why when we have the results, we then analyze them and assess them, what it means in the policy recommendations or in the roadmap that we are developing. But this is a very good point because now the market, you see, is evolving, and this is something we need to consider, the evolution, what is coming to align with this. It's a good point, I think, to be taken. Yeah.
Can I add a remark? Because something interesting to reflect upon is also what's the spread of consideration of CO2 or other sustainability criteria in procurement offices. We've been learning quite a lot recently on different hospitals and their procurement strategies. And you see that in terms of sustainability, they have already some benchmarks and requirements. So that might help as well, because with these numbers that you're showing, you can already pitch this to procurement offices that are already including sustainability as part of their decisions.
Yeah, I talked to a procurement manager in a hospital they are trying to include in the procurement decision the environmental aspects. And they said, well, it's hard to talk to a financial person about the environmental issue. He says, well, I don't care. I have to fix all the financial issues in the hospital. So if you know, what we did in the past is to externalize all the environmental costs, and we have, I think, to include it into the price of a product, into the price of a service.
And I like the word service at the end, because if you remember the overview, what is essential to understand is also the care pathway perspective then. Because if you internalize purely the carbon cost or GHG emission cost of the individual product, from a healthcare perspective, you're not achieving your goals. The aim is to decarbonize your healthcare system, not the individual product. So that is a very important nuance that has to be made. And today it looks like there's a very hard focus on product carbon footprint alone without the bigger context. So that is something we really should create awareness about, because as you saw in the picture, it's a marginal part of the entire care pathway. So that's where a bit of the risk lies of internalizing that price immediately, that you lose that bigger perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just a normal.
Yeah. Okay, then I think we can move on. I'm very happy that we are joined by Teresa and Ronja from the Increase project. So I'll give the floor.
We came prepared. We're not going to read all of this.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here today. I'm Teresa, together with my colleague Monja. We're both from Founder for IZM, based in Berlin, and we have the pleasure of coordinating the Increase project. And actually yesterday we just had our final event That's why we have so many printouts. Usually we don't bring all of the deliverables that we created. But now I think it links very well to what we just heard. And I think it's also a great opportunity to have these moments where we're sharing perspectives from different projects. In the Increase project, we're zooming a little bit into one of the R strategies, which is recycling, and zooming a little bit out of the medical sector, because we were looking into electronics a little bit more general and even beyond, but we're going to dive into that now. So who is the Increase project? We are 17 partners who are tackling or just finalized tackling the following challenge, namely to increase the share of recycled content, specifically plastic content, in added value products, which we identified several challenges for different products. For a resilient and digitized circular economy. And we are representing the entire value chain, which is needed. We're going to explain why we also realized that throughout the project. And we started off with building upon the knowledge that was already created into preceding projects. Firstly, the Close We project, which started already in 2014, where we managed to create a high-gloss piano black ABS, which was at that time already a significant challenge for the electronic sector. And then we continued with some remaining challenges that we identified in the first project, in the PolicyMakers project, where we managed actually to increase the share of recycled content in several products, such as coffee machines, vacuum cleaners, shavers. And then the EU, or actually the European EU Plastics Strategy, Plastics Alliance, came up with this significant goal of having 10 million tons of recycled plastics in new products by 2025. And considering that currently still the share of recycled content in electronics remains as low as 3.2%, we thought we will continue to tackling this challenge, where we picked 5 specific challenges that are quite relevant to the sector, which we're going to show to you in just a bit, because our project centers around 5 business cases that we have identified, which each represent one of those challenges. First of all, the medical sector. That's also a little bit of a touch point to the DiCE project, where we have an electrical toothbrush from Philips, where we try to increase the content of PCR plastics, so that's post-consumer recyclates. Then we tackled the food contact materials challenge, which is also a significant one, with a steaming device from the Thermomix by Vorwerk. Next to that, we focused on, first of all, switching from one material to the next, namely from ABS to polypropylene, in order to have a recycled content in a product that has quite some significant chemical resistance requirements and stability requirements. Then ESD properties, that's electrostatic discharge properties, which is typical for huge pallets that are transporting components, for example, from the automotive sector. And then last but not least, the flammability challenge, which is also quite relevant for the electronic sector. For all of these cases, we can already say we managed to have recycled content in there, and we're going to walk you through how we did this. First of all, an overview of the recycling technologies that we used in the project. That's also new compared to the previous projects that I showed you, where we were focusing on mechanical recycling only. And this time we also looked into more novel technologies, such as the solution recycling and pyrolysis as one of the chemical recycling technologies, in order to see for these really challenging applications, can these recycling technologies help us to bridge the gap. And we didn't do this only on a technical or technological level by creating recyclates and applying those recyclates in new applications, but it is also super crucial to think with the entire ecosystem that comes along, because it is great if we can technologically achieve something, but then if regulation doesn't allow us to do that, that's of course a challenge that also needs to be addressed. Therefore, we were working a lot with experts on circular product design, regulation and policy. Also, we did an environmental and costing assessment, and we were looking into the sourcing strategies. And as I already mentioned, we can tick the box we achieved for all of these applications to actually increase the share of recycled content or to even enable having recyclates in there. And I'm just going to give you a short highlight of all of the cases, which you can see here, because we looked from a secondary raw material perspective, trying to identify streams that can help us to get recycled materials that are suitable for the applications. And for example, for the first one, which is the Bokashi home composting device by SCASA, we first switched from one material to the next, as I mentioned, from ABS to polypropylene, which already brought some challenges along. And then when we introduced recycled polypropylene, new challenges came along, but in the end, we managed to have great properties. And now the challenge remains of really convincing internally that this material is really also coming into commercial applications. And this, of course, needs a lot of testing to be done still. Then secondly, for the EV charging device, we also learned that it is important if we change one visible part of the electronics, that with a recycled content, it is important to also change or increase or use these recycled materials in the other visible parts, because if the color changes only slightly, marketing will immediately say, no, this doesn't fit with our strategy. So it is important that the color is also consistent across the product. Then thirdly, we have the food contact device, where we also managed both with chemical and also the solution recycling to really achieve the requirements that are needed in the medical sector. And there we're going also for the next step with the EFSA approval in order to also make it possible to actually use this recycled content in products, which is currently not yet allowed from regulatory perspective. And the fourth case that you can see here, we also realized that it is not only about the polymer type, which is in this case polypropylene, but there is even further granular important aspects to consider. There is a difference between homopolymer and copolymer, which is also something I think both of us learned that this exists. And on this very granular level, it is even important to choose the right one. So there is a lot of challenges that come along once you dive into those. And for the last case that I show here, which is the toothbrush, we also were super happy to see that the solution recycling is actually safe and can be used for the medical sector. And with this, I hand over to you to walk us through more of the results.
Yes. So there are our results still. And if you follow very attentively, you see that there's a sixth case that's sneaked in, because Philips had also a medical application where it was about cuffs for, I think, blood pressure measuring or something. So they really did a lot of research then that started only during the project on the how these materials actually can comply with legal requirements, and they were really happy to find that actually those recycled, especially the solution recycled materials, can be applied for medical. They are certified yet, but they meet the requirements. And then, but also one learning was that unfortunately BPA is a little bit like the PFAS in the plastics world, because BPA can be everywhere. So even if you have pure materials, it can happen that through the processing it appears again. So that's also something we learned. So yeah, now we're going to very high level insights only, because it was 4 years research project, and this is only part of the deliverables we actually have. But what we can say that is this new clustering approach that we pursued by identifying within bigger weak categories, smaller product categories that contain a specific material. This is crucial for all the recycling processes that we have. That is crucial for mechanical recycling, that is crucial for solution-based recycling, and for chemical recycling, to really make them viable to create high-quality plastics. So we had this approach of really identifying specific fractions within bigger fractions, and then do inline analysis of those streams. And that really helped us to achieve those high quality recyclates, which we need in the industry. And we can also say that it's valuable from an ecological point of view. We did this for those different processes. And for example, the pre-sorting doesn't add up a lot of ecological burden, but it really helps to make best use out of the different technologies, which then every technology comes with specific advantages, but also disadvantages, also from an ecological point of view. So by increasing the yield per technology, we can make sure that we evaluate the advantages against the disadvantages. It also can be economically viable. We also proved that, and I'm going to show that. However, the sorting step from the economical point of view is the biggest impact actually at the moment, because it's manual labor, and manual labor in Europe is very expensive. So we have to kind of work on this, and we have partners that are working on this already, but we will also have to try to find new solutions on how to make the clustering maybe directly better, which then relates already to policy. And in the dissolution recycling step, there we see that the material costs and the capex are the highest. So there the learning is that really it's about the throughput, which leads again to the better sorting. So if we can increase the throughput, increase the output, then the price for the dissolution recycling will also drop significantly, which means as this technology seems to be applicable for food contact and for medical applications, there may be, okay, thank you, there may be really potential. Then, as we are here today talking about policies, we also looked into what our partners from ETH Zurich actually identified. They evaluated a lot of the policy landscape, and they found that the current policies mainly are on a supply push. They look a lot on the recycling quotes and collection rates and everything like this. Then only secondary, there is a little policy increasing the demand pool, but and then there's a third category of regulations looking at into life cycle safety and traceability, but they are not really aligned. There's a lot of mismatch, and what we identified to unify this and to make it really a working condition is that, first of all, we need the economic instruments that provide also a level playing field, because that's not given at the moment. Then we need the regulatory instruments for example, chemical substances as restrictions, and then more these traceability and information instruments, because, for example, the DPNP is a great idea, but for recycled, really hard to retrieve information from already broken products. So it's questionable how much the DPP will actually do at the end of the line. To conclude this, and there we have a lot of papers that you can also read, the interface between the waste product and chemical legislation need to be improved, because that's currently really missing. Then we have to have more instruments that are more increasing the demand rather than increasing the recycled content rather than the recycling rates. And yeah, with this, we could already prove that the recyclates have the potential to be also economically viable against virgin prices. This is prices from 2025, which don't include new developments, which will be positive for us. However, we have to say that in the for the recyclates, there is not a margin included yet. So this graph needs to be a little bit adjusted to make it better comparable. But yeah, there we have those three deliverables that may be really interesting for you. And to conclude, that is a graphic from Vito. They analyzed really the bigger map of what do we have in materials. So we have a lot of products that put in the market. We still don't collect enough in the e-waste, but we really do not really do a lot of recycling. And we have the materials already, so it's not about increasing collection rates at the moment. It's really about making use of what we have. And therefore, it's important to understand also better in what categories we have which materials to increase the quality. And this will hopefully lead us to having a market that is more coming from a market pool where we say, like, we need a specific PP with this qualities, where can we find it? Can you produce it for us for the next 3 years so that the recyclers will invest in the technologies rather than coming from the push, from the waste perspective. And that will help us to really bring those two perspectives that is there, because there is a demand for recyclates. Most high quality recyclates are sold out for 3 years now already, but we have a lot of quantities that are unfortunately do not meet the qualities. So we have to bring those together. And I think with this, what we showed today, we could do this. And we provided a lot of different tools, also maybe more interesting than for your partners, also for your departments, that help really increasing or like closing the loop, I'd say. So we also brought you our playbook in a digital form, and where you can download it. And yeah, we're happy to also discuss it during the breaks. What? Yeah, that is actually maybe really important also for today's discussion. Okay, yeah.
And if you are interested, because for yesterday's final event, we printed some of the deliverables which we brought today. So actually also for us bringing it back to Berlin is a little bit hassle. So you're free to take them if you're interested. Thank you.
Let's see how many more.
Others have been up for Encore. Any further questions for the increase team?
Many, but for the lunch break.
You're not up there yet.
Thank you.
Okay, and then I will invite the Encore team. And there's many presenter names, so if you can come forward. So we will have so our first speaker is Svenja. She's the academic coordinator of Encore. Then we have Diana, and Marco is still there, will join us. So the floor is yours, and you can use the.
Yeah, okay, great. So, well, in first place, let's sit down here. We have shared the time, so actually then you can see also what we are doing in Encore, but before that, first, thank you very much for the invitation. It's such a pleasure, okay, not only to present here, is because also we are really happy to continue with part of the work of what DiCE is doing, okay, because actually part of the goal also among the two projects actually support and enforce collaboration and enforce that the sustainability of the results and great results that you have seen in DiCE, okay, take over. And actually we would like to take some of the results to be integrated and make them sustainable and actually for supporting. So this is also one of the biggest pleasures that we also have as a core project, okay. From the Encore project, okay, we would like to go to comment, okay, that Gianni, okay, from Medtronic is actually as Medtronic is the industrial coordinator, okay, and myself, okay, I'm Senior Berta, I'm part of Polytechnical University of Madrid, okay. This is a split coordination because this is an IHI project, okay, so it's very industrially driven, and it's what is known as a PPP, so it's a private-public partnership as such. And with us, okay, from the Encore project, okay, I would like to introduce Marcos from University of Leiden, okay, Mariana from UCBM, from Campus Biomedical in Roma, okay, and from UDG Alliance, okay, Adrian, which is part of our also legal approach, and we are all in one of another manner will be participating here, and if any questions, please feel free to approach, okay, any of the participants, okay. So just to comment that. So a little bit, we presented a little bit in your past event also, and we would like to comment, and this is a little bit I went over it, okay, that we are this kind of like a project that is actually very industry oriented, okay, and the support and is to get, okay. the best approach and how to increase the circularity of medical devices somehow. This is more or less our proof concept since we have already 1 year, okay, as the project is coming, okay, we still have several years to go. And what is happening and what we are approaching, okay? We're quite focused in the medical sector, and the idea is to improve the circularity of the medical devices, especially single-use devices and packaging for medical devices. Somehow, okay, what we are doing is we are using the framework of sustainable by design, okay, and putting it over all the value chain. That means if you see the sustainable by design framework, okay, it has all the part of hazards, which for us it includes all the materials, all the part of the environment, the social part, the economic part, okay, and the regulatory part. You don't see circularity in sustainable by design, and this is what we want to like it. We don't use, and we don't have circularity in sustainable by design. This is a tool. What is circularity for us as foreign port? Circularity is a behavior. What we are trying to do is to change the behavior from more linear behavior, okay, of how to do in the pathways and the lifetime of the medical devices, okay, to a more circular behavior in the medtech industry for those devices. And that's why, for example, you don't see it as circular really in sustainable by design in the framework as such. So for us, sustainable by design framework is the tool, okay, that we're using to change this kind of behavior inside the medical device industry. So what is our what we are doing? We're getting and we're doing this kind of catalog of materials that together with the processes through all the value chain from design to the end of life, okay, that a medical device has in their whole life cycle. That means since it is conceived to the time that is somehow destroyed or incinerated or taken for reuse or taken for recyclability, okay, to assess in the whole value chain, okay, in each of the stages of the value chain is the sustainable by design. That means, okay, that what we are doing is first to assess the current linear approach of the medical devices, okay, and actually step by step and looking for the hotspots. That means to see what is feasible to be changed or not, or what is maybe to be improved. We do an operational approach. Our operational approach goes through 2 pathways. We have 5 use cases, okay, in single-use medical device that I'm going to introduce a little bit after this slide, okay? And we have put the synergies in 2 types of pathways. The home pathway, that is those medical devices as Synergies, okay, that the people uses at home, okay? And then the waste stream goes through kind of like city approach, and the ones that are used, okay, through hospitals as such. So then we look and then how they are used and how it can be improved at the hospitals, and then how the waste, okay, is processed after that. For each of the areas, as commented, we are putting the sustainable and device, sustainable by design. That means, okay, that we're assessing the 5 areas in each of the, to actually see the balance, okay? And then we are applying it, and once we have that, we will have the expected results and such, okay? And actually, we are embedding it into type of tools that are coming already and adapted, and actually they come actually from the transportation sector, okay? That is, we're going to visualize through the digital passport, okay, and the circular calculator, okay, to actually integrate, okay, this information and to have it all. So this is how we look, okay? We look with the whole value chain. Some of our use cases start a little bit at this time, but the main focus of the use cases that we have are at the end. So most of it, okay, what we're trying to do is we're assessing the end of life, especially for the current market. And we mean with that, products that are already designed and still aim to last 10 to 12 years in the market. For those products, okay, to do the design right now is not possible, let's say, because they need to go, as you saw in the previous presentation, through a lot of legal processes to be approved to the market. That is almost that time. So those are the ones that really still make high carbon footprint and a lot of impact, not only in the environment, but also from economic perspective, okay? But at the same time, our findings aim to be included in the design of the future product, okay? So actually then they are improved to be conceived from a mentality that is much more circular as such, okay? So that means changing the materials. So this is how our use cases look. We have 5 use cases, and we call it reference use cases, meaning reference use cases, because probably when we do the sensibility analysis to see what we can change, okay, we will have kind of like sub use cases inside that. So our first group is about drug injection devices. So that means like, for example, insulin pins or Synergies, okay? And then we have, let's go to group 2, okay, which is in the hospital pathway. There are products that are for irrigation, okay, and actually dialysis, okay, and medical devices. And let me go to jump a little bit to group 5, that are medical devices that are used in surgery rooms, okay? So surgery rooms is one of the ones that not only use a lot of devices, but single-use medical devices, okay, due to the fact of need of sterility and fast reaction, okay, to the patient if something happens or in any of the device, for example, fall down to the floor. Then we have 2 other use cases, that is group 3 and group 4, that are about packaging. So first one, okay, is about plastic packaging, and the second one is more cellulose packaging. So for all of them, what we are doing is both devices and packaging go through all the value chain and go through the usage step of the value chain more specifically, okay, and assess a little bit how it is used, what it is used, why it's done like this, and what it can be changed a little bit to actually have our assessment aspect. So this is what you are going to see. So actually we have all the steps of the value chain, and for each step, okay, and for each of the devices, we go step by step, and we're going to look in the hazard, we're going to look at the materials, okay, and that's where we are building a set of catalog of materials to see what are the ones used, what are the potentially be substituted later, or what it can be done, okay, with this material from recycling perspective, okay. Then the social dimension, which is the social impact, and you see in the center environment, and we put it in on purpose in the center, okay, as environment as such, because it's the main goal. Because sorry that I go little bit to this one, because when we go to the results, okay, our aim is not only avoid incineration, but the idea really is to avoid unnecessary incineration. Right now, with the products that are in the market, potentially it's very impossible to say that we're going to have zero incineration, because the way that they were designed were several years ago, and with a safety approach that is even regulatory mandatory to be done like this. But the idea is to have intangible numbers. How much would it be from economic, okay, from social, from environmental, and from regulatory perspective to actually decrease this incineration and to have it as a number, which also is an impact as such. I'm sorry. So going back to this, okay, this is how it looks, and this is how it goes. So we go for the hazard, we are doing the catalog of material, looking at the materials of each of the devices that we have, okay, looking for the potential, not only substitute, but the potential routes that it could be taken, or how with the current technology, or maybe further technology, can be recycled, okay, and how would it be able to really input in all this. Then we have the social dimension, okay, well, just to say that safety is not negotiable, okay, so this is an issue for, even if we have to get a balance for the environment and that, safety is not something that is negotiable as such. So you will see on the left part things that are more qualitative, but actually less negotiable at some point, okay? And on the right-hand side, okay, things that we might able to change better, that as regulation, okay, or from economic impact, maybe a trade-off from the sector, or either, okay, the cities, okay, how it can be done. That means, for example, what is happening with the organic food, okay? Also, the demand is able to pay a little bit more, okay, for things that are more organic, or more, well, in the same way, in circular. As it was commented by Marco, but actually commented by us, okay? We are looking with the hospitals, and actually procurement is actually put it at the top of the devices to be selected by the doctors, okay? The ones, okay, that are more recyclable. So we will go, and you will listen from Mariana, the part Mariana, the part of regulatory, from Marco a little bit on the process. But I would like to comment, okay, that at the end, what we are having this in the tools that we have 2 tools that are the ones that are going to have the catalog of materials, where they are going to have, we are not applying artificial intelligence, okay, in this project as such, but, okay, what we are having is kind of like the tools that we are bringing and actually link with the environment, all the economic part, all the social part, and actually the process. And this is where we want to get the trade-off on more or less how the processes have started. Last but not for least, okay, if this is our project, how we would like to integrate DiCE in board. We have detected, okay, or pre-detected 3 main areas. One, as it was commented by Sonia and presented by Sonia, okay, it is all the things that have been done in the recycling loop, okay, including the butterfly. What we have seen there is a lot of taxonomy of vocabulary that we believe it could be very important because actually this will drill, okay, one of the main criteria for no or avoiding incineration, which is that right now, one of the big problems is that there is no criteria for having a product to be incinerated or not. There is no criteria for a medical device at hospitals to be recycled or not. So the idea of that is that we believe that through our project, okay, we do that, okay, we believe that will increase. By having several of these taxonomies will actually help to, for example, to the audit, okay, but also for us, okay, to actually have this kind of regulatory alignment. The stakeholder frameworks and social LCI that also present a little bit, okay? So we believe that this part actually links with all the social impact that we want to include. And last but not for least, okay, what it maybe was not fully presented, but the terminology and sustainability terminology that also will link to the regulatory part, because part of what we do is to try to see how regulatory can be changed or adapted to actually increase our product. And this is what we are going to see in the next slides. So the idea was first that you know the what of what we do and why we do it, okay? And now we will have points 1 and 2 that will be presented by Marco and to say how we are looking at how to include DiCE and Mariana in number 3, and we will close. So we hope you like.
Thank you very much, Xenia. And thank you to the previous speakers. I found these initial overviews very interesting because it connects very well with what the industry, the sustainable domain is trying to do, to what the academics that I saw in the last few days at the conference in Maastricht are trying to do as well. So what has been insightful over the last 1.5 years, at least from my perspective, has been to understand that a lot of harmonization work has been going on. And what's very useful in this domain is that it has been happening mostly at the initial phase of what safe and sustainable by design aims to achieve, which is in the definition, by design. So by design, we've got to work on creating new ways of managing medical devices and packaging materials, specifically with a focus for ENCORE on single use. And to connect this to what we saw earlier, already in the first presentation by Sonia, is harmonization in terms of what different circularity routes do we have available to choose from. And this nice work that has been done within DiCE showed how it was important to try to match the specificities of healthcare to the circularity definitions. So now we have 13 different strategies that can be used within healthcare, and we have a good identification of the key stakeholders that need to be involved, as well as indication of which type of data do you need to have to make different strategies possible. And then in the context of ENCORE, we started thinking, okay, if I want to implement a different end-of-life strategy, if I want to do recycling type A or B or C, this is a nice link with increase. Or if I want to do reuse in a way or in another way, what should happen to make that a reality? So we learned that a lot of things need to change to make that a reality. And in most of the cases, it's not only or mainly a technical challenge. You have organizational constraints. You have regulatory constraints, as we'll hear in a few minutes, and you have operational constraints as well. And every time you have different actors that need to make a change or to do a decision that has to enable something to happen so that at the end of the day, recycling can take place, reuse can take place. And if you look around, a tool to help an actor, and this actor can be a medtech company, can be a hospital, can be a healthcare facility manager, can be a policymaker, is not available yet. You've got to go and talk with a lot of experts, many of whom are in this room, and say, all right, if I'm in the geography X and I have a hospital with these capabilities and I have an end-of-life actor with those capabilities, then I can do recycling of a certain type, or maybe not. But it depends a lot on these specificities. So the main target that we are working on now is this tool that is, we call it a pathway builder. So it's a solution that helps figuring out who do you need to involve to make a different end-of-life treatment a possibility, with a specific focus on recycling for some of the rooks, but it's very transposable and applicable to different case types. I don't have any formulas, so don't worry. I just have some concepts here to show you a bit the reasoning. And what you see here are different stages of the life cycle. We have seen this already in a couple of slides earlier. And the way we are doing this work is to match the current status quo. You see here different boxes. These different boxes are the current ways of using a medical device in the healthcare sector, with the assumption that we have incineration as the status quo, so the linear system. And what we've been doing over the last year or so, but we're still operating on this, is to figure out which additional options do we have inside all these different boxes. And I want to clarify that the connection between these different options is what we call the status quo, the business as usual. So if you go in the literature or you talk with experts, you end up having a lot of different options you can choose from. You might change the barrel material, you might have interesting different sterilization methods, you have different transport modes, different ways of using, different ways of collecting, and different ways, obviously, of managing the end of life. And as I was mentioning at the start, that you always need to think about a governance structure. So the different roles you see listed here are the ones that determine what can be changed, who has to say, who has to approve what can be changed, who has to be consulted when you want to change something, and who has to be informed if you change something. So we are trying to map all these different roles within all these different stages. But as you have already mentioned in the previous presentations, there are interdependencies here. For example, if I have by PLA, for example, I possibly, I mean, it's possible that it's not possible, okay, let's put it like this, to sterilize a certain device or a material with a certain method, because technically it's not a possibility. So we report this information in a matrix that will know that these two cannot be combined. Or in a similar way, it should be on controlled reuse. For example, you have a medical device that currently cannot be reused. Why? Because in that jurisdiction, from a regulatory standpoint, it's not possible. All right. So we map this constraint. It should, the arrow should be here, and we know that this is not possible. So this is an iterative process that we started working with our partners through. And the cool point is that we can automatize then this metrics in the tool that I mentioned, which will be able to tell you if you are in location X and you are interested in this end-of-life solution, you have to do certain actions that we make that end-of-life treatment a possibility. Okay, so this is the first link that we have in terms of end-of-life management. And I see I need to speed up a second. Another interesting point that actually was mentioned partially, I think, from Sonia, is the fact that in addition to having shaped a lot of the sustainability, social life cycle assessment methodology, you have tested social life cycle assessments within some of the case studies of your project. And the main point here that I want to communicate is that we can keep building upon that very solid methodology within the different case studies that we have. The beauty is that you always figure out nuances and restrictions of applicability of some of these solutions according to the case studies you have. So the bottom line here is to go through the different routes that Senia introduced earlier and try to have a look at which individual subcategories from all the categories you see reported here that are kind of the backbone of social life cycle assessment, and try to understand which information can be gathered for which actors, so that we can understand where the hotspots for our single-use devices and packaging materials stand in these regards. I still have a couple of things to mention, and this is something I will definitely follow up with the colleagues from INCREASE. That is the challenge of figuring out or automatizing the way you can align the different type of materials you have in the devices and the type of solution that fits for your purpose, in this case, from a recycling perspective, right? Because what we started doing now is that there is a remarkable number of different materials within the devices. And if you want to enhance scalability, right, you've got to figure out how to match as quickly as possible the type of the devices to the type of the recycling solution, hopefully without going through 5 years of testing. So that's an interesting research challenge. And I'm moving towards my last slide, which, yeah, I think I can stop here. Small on purpose, but why is it important? It's very important because even though the digital product passport, for those that don't know it, it's a regulation that relates to the Eco Design Directive, is not directly related to the medical domain. There are a lot of chemicals, a lot of materials that are used to have products in every type of application. Is there. So why this scary graph behind? This is an initial ontology, so a representation of a system, specifically for a drug injection device here, but it tries to show what we are aiming at, which is to connect the devices to the components that go into the device to the system where the device is embedded. As different digital product passports can be shaped according to where the device is used. And I think it's a nice link to keep in mind because yeah, the Eco Design Directive is coming fast. So it's a nice link that allows me to hand over to Mariana that will bring forward the conversation on regulation. Thank you. Okay, please.
Thank you very much, Marco. And of course, I will be very brief because everyone knows the regulation is the most boring part of the presentation, as usual. But first of all, I would like to do a very quick history on new regulation and sustainability, highlighting the fact that it was, in fact, sustainability from the start of the EU. It is not presented in the slide, but I did a very quick search, and already in 1986, through the Single European Act, in particular in Title 9, it was amended the Treaty of Rome, including environmental protection principles inside of the Roman Treaty. So from the start of the European Union, the principle of environmental protection and sustainability was already there. In fact, from 1972, the European Union adopts Environmental Action Program 6, and now we are in the 8th Environmental Action Program, setting priorities for environmental protection and sustainability. And the one it is in act now that will end in 2030 values 6 priorities, including circular economy. So I think the efforts that the European Union does and with researcher and industry are very much aligned. And of course, you can see this effort throughout the different regulation that also applies to the healthcare sector. But of course, the healthcare sector is not the largest polluter, but we are still a polluter. In fact, for example, we produce 6 million tons of medical waste in the European Union. But how can we tackle these big challenges if we do not share the same languages? That's why through the DiCE project, we collected this input on creating a shared glossary on specific terminologies that can be shared throughout the life cycle of medical devices and through different stakeholders inside of this big challenge. Of course, we have researcher, industry, manufacturer, waste processing facilities, and policymakers and regulatory agencies. This was the initial input from DiCE that we are bringing forward with the input project. Also enriching the glossary, the consortium and the research we are conducting. And this way we can all agree on specific terminologies and know each other a little bit better. But our research is not stopping solely to terminology. We are also conducting a systematic mapping of EU regulation on sustainability and especially medical devices. We conducted systematic research on EU LEX, that is the most comprehensive European regulation database. And we included legally binding level documents from 2015 to 2025, addressing sustainability regulation relevant to medical devices. Also including regulation on environment, circular economy, safety, labeling, procurement, also if applicable to healthcare sector and medical devices. And we collected all the relevant documents and did a thematic analysis based on the thesis that you can see on the slides that are throughout the life cycle and value chain of the medical devices. These are the final included directive and regulation. We decided at the end of our initial analysis to exclude three main environmental regulations: the Habitat Directive, the Water Framework Directive, and REACH regulation. Even though the REACH regulation will be part of our final analysis once the other part of the project will identify key enabling materials to be evaluated throughout the REACH regulation. And of course, throughout all these different regulations are three pillars and three principles that can be summarized. And these are the polluters pay principles, the prevention principles, and the precautionary principle. So, of course, all of that have different peculiarities, different characteristics, and can be applied throughout different scopes of not only medical devices, but other products. But these are the three main principles that should lead the regulation directives in the EU. And this is a exemplification of the life phases that I was telling you about. And we matched the phases identified by the ENCORE consortium with the ones we found in the literature on medical devices. So the terminology, going back to the shared language and terminology, varies a bit in literature, academic literature on the topic, and we did the effort to match the phase to the different terminologies. So, for example, obsolescence became waste processing and, of course, waste production. Lastly, I will go very quickly on these slides. It's just an example of our effort to thematically analyze this directive through the life cycles of the medical device. But we are not stopping here because, of course, Excel files, I hope it starts. Why is it starting from the computer? Okay, yeah. It's starting. Of course, everyone knows that Excel files are very difficult to navigate and can be a challenge. So we are working on an interactive tool that maps all the regulation I was telling you about, making sure that stakeholders and people inside the consortium and above the consortium can really interact with the regulations in a way that is easy to use and easy to understand, and also easy to apply to their current work. So this is an example of a mock-up of how it will work at the end of the project. And you can select all the characteristics and criteria.
All right, if I may, just because
Yes.
that we're doing this, one of the key features that we want to integrate within this is automatic or more or less automatic alignment to the specific use of each one of our stakeholders. So for each one of the use cases, we are trying to provide tailored, let's say, views that simplifies their lives to understand, okay, what are the compliance pathways that we can use? And also we want to map it to the standardization activities of the project. So we can bring in, hopefully, if IPR permits, you know how it is, some best practices and recommendations that they could integrate. So this is an ongoing challenge in the sense that there's a lot of elements. We're going to be discussing this later, but that's the idea that we're pursuing.
So, and with that, I will pass the floor to Xenia with final remarks on the INCORE project.
It's just to leave the slide for the next.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just to leave the slides for the discussion or if questions, okay, just for the people just to have in mind, okay, that as a core project, okay, what we are, I mean, in our scope, what we are trying to get from DiCE, okay, just summarize a little bit, okay, and what is next, okay, expecting not only to be with DiCE in some other approach, but actually in our calendar, okay, that is actually support not only the escalation from DiCE, okay, but actually to progress in all the activities that you saw, and how the tools will be done later. But it was just to have a last slides for questions with that in mind.
I think we have some time for questions, maybe first for Encore, and then we can still have a few other questions for all the speakers from this morning so far. Anything in particular for the Encore team?
For the Encore. Yes, thank you. It was very interesting. I am in core as well, but still very interesting to see this consolidation. I wanted to say that I see also the dashboard that we just presented on the navigation for regulations and other indicators could be aligned with our dashboard. We are also producing in DiCE one, so that could be another, let's say, opportunity for very early operate. We have the reverse logistic plan as well, because it's about collection, no? Maybe that would, once it's ready, of course, that could be immediately handed over and explained and taken up. I see this too as a very big flows of deliverables that we could work on.
And on that last point, also the training material that is now being developed for the operational workers, all the actors downstream, that I think is also a very valuable outcome.
Yeah, it's also really cool because the idea is that the public builder that I mentioned, we are trying to capitalize upon existing cool examples of what's out there that's been working for different items.
Yeah.
So training material that has been developed and is useful can be integrated in the tool so that one anecdote is like, okay, if I want to enhance the sorting in hospital that had reluctancy from nurses, how did I do it? And maybe there's a good example that you have, and we leave this. It will be, let's say, at the start, maybe a boring PDF, but at least we have it there. And then maybe it can become something more, maybe some videos or whatever that is.
Actually, yes, because this is part of the social LCA, and actually this will be integrated it's actually aimed to be integrated in the circular calculator. Our circular calculator, which is the tool, okay, integrates several of the let's say processes, call it pathways, processes, call it and all the 5 dimensions, okay? It's not only LCA as such, okay? So this is, it's called the suite of services, okay? In the work suite of services, okay? No, the work package for the regulation just started with all this approach, so actually it's very new. So I think it's the first presentation, even
Yeah.
inside of the consortium.
Exactly.
Because they just started a little bit. I mean, as you know, our project is only 1 year and many of the things are started, okay? But actually, if you see it, even in the last slide, okay, the people from the suite of services asked, okay, to see if we can include this as part of in the full dashboard to be good, so all the services are together. What we want in Ecuador is to have this kind of suite that goes all together, okay? And as you saw, for example, I believe the social LTA, which has to do with the workers, okay, is also in our view, when we were building it in what we wanted to have it, because it's something quite forgotten, okay? When you get, okay, to the area of environment and to actually, okay, even the sustainable by design part, okay? And they're one of the main stakeholders at the end because are the ones that are processing, okay, both devices and waste.
And the way it's been created is really also from the actor perspective. So it really points you as a hospital operator what you need to do. As somebody doing the reverse logistics, what you need to do. So it's very actionable from that perspective. So hopefully that will
Yeah, I think that also to point on your interaction, particularly the different views and dashboards we presented, I think that's the major win that we can extract from here, particularly towards exploitation, sustainability, and replicability of the solutions of both projects, in the sense that it's very clear, the more you work, that the lower down or the more, let's say, down to earth stakeholder you're trying to address, they might have an idea of where they want to go, but they have no idea how to get there. And that is what, we should be trying to generate a pathway to get there.
Yeah.
I'm not sure because maybe I missed that part. I love these like systemic evaluations of dependencies because I think they are so relevant to understand whom to address. And at the moment, what happens in your example, for example, we don't allow for bio-based plastic because they are not steam certified or they don't work with the steam sterilization, so they are not allowed. Whereas then maybe someone tries to invent bio-based plastics that are steam possible, or someone says like we have to have a new sterilization way. And so for me, the most interesting part is always to understand on what level do we put what lever to change. For example, now that we have robots, potentially contaminated waste from hospitals can all of a sudden be sorted, which wasn't possible before, right? So like, where is the innovation or where do we put the intervention? Is that something that you think you can evaluate also better with this?
Yeah, actually, I would like to comment on that something because it was a conversation that we were having before regarding the transportation sector and automotive sector. This project was highly inspired, okay, in the automotive sector, which is actually much more advanced at some point in all this systemic integration. So all the way that when we put in our concept the pathways and like that, and actually the digital passport, and that's important, we're using the digital passport for visualization, okay, more than that, because actually for us commented, it doesn't apply exactly now, but it probably would apply as manufacturers to the medtech sector, okay, later, okay. So we are using it as visualization because we saw it as part of the future. And actually, the digital passport right now is what is allowing in several of these sectors this kind of systemic view as such. So many of these things that you say, how the pathway were put, okay, in the proposal and that came, okay, from actually examples that are quite working right now, actually, and we try to adapt it in proposal, okay, and was the part of a big inspiration, okay, when the project was together to have kind of like a real sector with needs, okay, and someone that has advanced like automotive, okay, in this direction as such. And that's why how many of the things come together and the experience of several people. So for example, some of the tools, and some not all of the tools, they are not developed from scratch. They are brought actually IHI asked for having innovative SMEs. So we brought innovative SMEs, okay, that were working in DPP for automotive sector to actually implement it, okay, in medical sector as such. So the things that we're developing not from they are existing softwares, okay, already come. So we're not developing like a big suite of services because our project is not technical as such, okay. So for sure the dashboards and like this, yes, but not the other ones.
And just the idea is to firstly consolidate what's available there, right? And maybe then we will find the innovative potentials as well. So if you're like, because we learned about the issue of visual change, sorry. So if you can do sterilization with this device, no problem, but it will become yellowish. And then you have that issue from the visual, from the communication team, right? So then we don't do this with NCORE, but the research question is like, okay, can I then do a sterilization that does not affect the visual appearance of the material? And then technically that option will become a reality. So you identify also further options for technology development, but we will not work on the technologies per se.
Plus the impact. When you have all this systemic, because you put the alternative, when you feed it on, you can try to see, we try to see the impact with the vitamin.
Okay, I think we can continue part of this discussion during coffee break. What is really the aim of this session here specifically? This is following already a workshop we did in November in Eindhoven at the Philips premises, where we had an initial assessment of any systemic barriers we identified between regulations, and where we, in a sort of workshop fashion, all co-design some of the recommendations going forward. And the focus here is really to critically look at these recommendations to enhance the competitiveness of the European value chains on digital health devices, and to also prioritize these policy recommendations going forward. As said before, this is very timely because we are at the crossroads of the Circular Economy Act. So any advice that we can bring or any recommendations that we can bring might be helpful. Of course, we would like to make this also an interactive session, so Q&As are welcome during the panel discussion as well. What is the output here? This will feed back into our key deliverable on policy recommendations. So any feedback on what we already identified is more than welcome. And that will be then presented as September, which is the final month of DiCE. Who is it intended for? Obviously for policy and decision makers. So hopefully we can really bring that message. So now I'm going to pass on to Maria. Thank you.
Yes, my time is to really show you the regulatory insights that comes from the DiCE pilots. Of course, pilots connect abstract legislation, with practical challenges. And for that, we design a pilot ecosystem, in order to identify collection systems and return behaviors, and also to test, new motivational strategies, because everything starts with users, and users should return the devices. Otherwise, no logistics operations take place, no recovery materials take place. So the point here with DiCE piloting is that we have to really move forward in order to improve the collection rates. And in this case, it's for the digital device specifically. Of course, this is not from the hospital perspective, but just for the household digital health devices. We choose electronic pillboxes to cover the motivational strategies, but all users, can return any digital device, used at home. This way, we could also prove and also test how users understand digital health devices, the concept, and also the return system, how they get the message of returning devices. We use two return infrastructure. So we combine physical collection points, using smart technologies. Sonia saw before, this green container, that use a smart technology that is connected to a platform in which we can monitor the returns. And also they have like a module to try to attempt recognizing the device that is being returned. Of course, the Maybach system is for convenience, and we also would like to check or to prove, if there is any return method that may be best performance. the collaborative stakeholder involvement was essential for this. We had like community engagement session with citizens and healthcare professionals that were pretty much, showing how to design the pilot. And later on, under the execution, we have the collection points that were mainly pharmacy, public spaces, and commercial establishment. The smart technology providers with this platform I already talked about, the logistics operators, and also the responsibility organizations, for WIP and treatment facilities. The idea was to mimic real life governments, in order to check, in order to assess how pilot can go. The operational findings that we have already assessed is that system design saves user behavior. Of course, depending on how you design your collection system, factors like convenience, clarity, trust, and visibility, may change the user perspective of the collection method, and of course, the result of that collection. Nudging strategies or motivational strategies that we use also, like the packaging, because sometimes, the motivational strategies come later when you have the product outside in the market. But in this case, we use some packaging designs, that trying to prove if they can change the return willingness of users. So this was also another practical pathway for our DiCE pilots. Of course, we did the pilots in 3 regions, Valladolid in Spain, Maribor, Slovenia, and Gil in Belgium. And of course, we found that preferences in method, preferences, understanding of the measure, and so on, may, of course, vary across regions and groups, okay? Because also we checked, different age groups, and so on. So this is also a finding that may require like tighter designs. So we have like a really pretty much standardized method, but of course it has to be tailored, to the target and also to the region it's going to be implemented. We have found that circular digital health is achievable, of course, and the main barriers is about regulatory misalignment, because technology is there, and we have proved that user willingness is also there. Healthcare-related collection environments are best performance, that all the type of collection points. So whenever you are talking about digital health devices, if you relate this with healthcare connections, it performs better. The multi-channel collection improves accessibility. So we are not talking about just one single collection return. So we have to also, try to keep, a multi-channel return method. If we have an early separation and pre-sorting, with upstream, we can improve, the afterward routes for the devices. And reuse potential is lost, once devices enter conventional treatment streams. So that's why we try to keep, the pre-sorting as a key for making other routes possible. And reverse logistics, we have proved that conventional systems, so collection systems, are not yet adapted to healthcare-related electronics. This is because of the infection risk. This is because the safety go first, that we will see later as an insight. So reverse logistics may be like a critical enabler for circular policy because it ensures safe handling and management of the return devices. Smart collection systems, of course, give traceability to the system, monitor the system, and of course, reducing the risk management in reverse logistics. Producer responsibility organization, for we in this case, aligns collection and treatment with other regulatory requirements. And the last operational finding is that MAVAC systems are promising for small digital health devices. So the insight one is regulatory fragmentation is something that we have been talking a lot, from DiCE and also in other projects, that there is an inconsistent interpretation of the MDR and the B directive, limits circularity because we have a lot of gaps in between, so we cannot connect with if it's coming from the MDR sector, but we can collect it, but if it's not infectious, so there is a lot of gaps, connections between these two regulatory instruments. This may increase cost for companies, so this is reducing incentives for circular innovation. Of course, on the waste management side, a clear regulation is always making the waste to be incinerated instead of, taking another previous routes. On citizens and circularity, we can see that fragmentation creates confusion, and also device returns hinders effective final solutions, for these type of devices. So in a nutshell, we need regulatory harmonization. We need a stronger harmonization and guidance, to reduce the uncertainty and support scalable circular solutions. The inside does. Inside two. Fake news risk uncertainty. This is something that is that has been, in a lot of discussions in DiCE project. The infection risk, the safety goes first, and this ambiguity, because when we can collect coming from the healthcare sector, but the directive excludes those devices that are expected to be infectious at end of life. And this subjective, sentence makes that many devices are incinerated because they are mixed with other hazardous substances or other hazardous products. So, of course, the systems are insufficient to cover these digital health devices because, of course, we need or we require, different approach, to collect and to treat digital health devices. But there is limited guidance on classification, on routing, and the contamination enabled recovery pathways. So for all of this, we have the need, for regulatory alignment. That means that we need healthcare waste, healthcare sector waste management and circular economy to be aligned, for clarity. The inside 3 is about waste classification, and we know that current, hazard-based classification is too broad, for many digital devices. So we are restricting recycling options because of this lack of classification. Misclassification, as I said before, limits material recovery, and also handling and the contamination can improve recycling, but we need guidance on how to do it. So for us, the main legislative input is that we need to revise, the waste lists and also to make device-specific criteria, that for legally make this happen. The last insight has to do with reverse logistics, because now, the home use devices, postal returns, and cross-border logistics, lack clarity. So we are having a lot of operational risk. The postal returns, can be effective, but of course, the legal status in some regions and also for some product devices, it's still ambiguous. The reporting gaps and traceability, we have proved that the smart collection can solve this gap, but of course, integration into regulatory system is still limited. And of course, the alignment between these incentives for users, the infrastructure, for the collection, the logistics, that have to happen in between, and the regulation could enable circular digital health practices. In a world, we need legal guidance in order to enable, reverse logistics beyond end of life. Yeah. So this makes, this from insights to policy action. We need integrated systems. We have already talked about, this, that we need to look, into a more broad regulatory changes instead of isolated. We have aligned objectives. We have safety, sustainability, digitalization, and risk management must be addressed together to make effective circular practices to take place. Classification and scope should be clarified. Some interpretations of MDR, directive, and other waste laws should ensure regulatory clarity. We have the digital product passport that we already have talked about. Could give this traceability, and a smart collection system could also, make this to be a real tool. Because also for DiCE, we have seen that there is a lot of lack of data. We cannot monitor. We cannot many times provide good solutions because there is no connection between the product into the market and the product to be collected. So there is not matching that states. Of course, we need, as I said, guidance on the contamination because there are some options, to decontaminate products, to make an earlier, safety route instead of incineration. We have to reduce, of course, risk-averse practices, and of course, harmonize guidelines on classification. And the main or the last point is that policymakers must prioritize coherence, clarity, and implementation support along with legislative ambition. So yeah, that's all. I don't know if questions later on, or if you have any question, maybe. So just later. Okay. Yeah.
Any questions for
Okay.
Maria?
Then maybe a bit more, then we'll pass it on to Sonia, then we can come back.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Maria. That was a very good introduction on what we will see now, that is kind of higher level, a summary consolidation of findings of learnings throughout the project. And basically, this is leading to the policy recommendations that we are preparing, that is a DiCE outcome, and which bases on the learnings from the pilots, from the work that Marie explained, but also other pilots, other activities that we have been conducting. And we integrated as well learnings from consultations, policy dialogues, interviews. So thank you very much for participating, because this is exactly the type of exercise that help us integrating this feedback. And also our participation in European Commission calls, where we contributed with feedback, for example, to the Circular Economy Act and to the Medical Devices Regulation 2017, both happened last year. So all this help us make it up our minds and really consolidating, thinking, digesting results, and envisioning what the future would look like if we proceed with our recommendations and become reality. So also we expect that they will inform decision makers in future. So taking up the recommendations and improve the ecosystems, regulatory ecosystems for circularity. With this, to present our work, the way we identified the key requirements, regulatory regulatory instruments, the framework on which we base our work, and this is integrated in 3 groups. 4. one, starting with the general design aspects, where you may know very well the eco design for sustainable product regulation that was launched recently, we could say, and that is in the implementation, including several important clauses, areas like digital product passport among them. We know that this is not applying directly, of course, to medical devices, but we are learning, we have to take into consideration the principles in the future to come. So this is considered in our proposals. As you will see later, we have the chemical substances related relations as well. These were also presented, taken up by Mariana. So I think I see a lot of consistency in our identification. The Critical Raw Materials Act. Why this is important? Because you will talk about digital health devices, and a key component are the electronics. And this is directly related to the Critical Raw Materials Act because of the content of these electronics. So we are paying a lot of attention on any developments, on requirements, on targets that would result from this regulation. The battery regulation as well, for the same reason as I explained before. We have the electronics in the components of the digital health devices. And the packaging, sometimes we disregard this. It's also relevant because of this type of product that is very sensitive, where there are provisions for the health and safety of patients, etc. So this is also a key regulation with requirements to be considered since the design. Now we go to the manufacturing, and there, of course, maybe additional ones to the ones that were mentioned. We have the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. What it means that looking into what is going to be sourced, produced for manufacturing, is to be considered. And then we have a number of requirements. So in the value chain, in the sourcing, beyond Europe, even. So that is a key one. Also to consider on transparency, meaning during the use phase. During the use phase, if we're talking about what we are communicating about the data that is going to be obtained, but also communicated. So we have as the digital product passport, not directly applying yet. It's still under development and in the platforms, in systems, but this is something we are watching out. Also because actually there is a database, the Euromed, right? So we see future linkages, and there should be. And by the way, there is another project. I mentioned this because we might be hearing in future about this one, medtech label, that is looking into labeling data of medical devices that will probably is just starting. We will need to connect, to link, and also see the developments regarding this information, this type of topic on information. Then we have the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive that is about the communication to prevent, for example, greenwashing or these aspects that happen. And the General Data Protection Regulation in terms of potential risks of data data from patients that could be exposed. So this is totally taken care of. And in the last stage, lifecycle stage, the end of life, not end of life, but circularity of the products. We heard a lot about the WE directive, and this was very, very relevant. I mean, a piece of work here, because the digital health devices, as Maria explained, could many of these be WE, but there are some challenges. So that's why this is a key regulations. Identified also the waste directive with the classification of waste with other provisions, definitions. The transboundary shipment regulations, we see that transboundary movements in these international value chains is essential. So that there are also hurdles, and we have to navigate them. I would say, in addition, relevant is the Empowering Consumers Directive in terms of strengthening the capacity, the possibility of consumers, of citizens, to make decisions, to make better informed decisions. That means we should also inform them about the options at the end of life, or circular options, so for them to support these circularity strategies. The medical device regulation is a key framework. So this is why it's presented as a basis. And you may know this is under revision, and maybe the European Commission can confirm. This year, we understand will be published based on a number of comments received and the revision. So we already studied the revised version. So we are looking forward to that. And the Circular Economy Act, which is under development. So these are key developments. So we hope to stay really on very, very aligned with the recommendations. We are looking into the latest development for launching them and for implementing them in the future. We talk about the fragmentation. We heard about this. Maria confirmed or explained about the ways, the WE directive, and the WE aspects fragmentation in countries. This is on the MDR fragmentation. So depending on regulations, we have some similar situations. And mainly what it says here is that according to the current version of the 2017 year of the MDR, countries were opting in, opting out, the reprocessing, sometimes even adapting a little bit. So what you see is the ones in green have as of today adopted the reprocessing. It's possible to do reprocessing of medical devices there. The ones in red said no. The ones in yellow are in consultation. Probably if something happened very, very recently, it's not updated there, but this is the main. What it wants to say also is that if you want to export from one country to the other, from Belgium to Spain, or to Italy, we have to watch out how the regulatory conditions are, how this will be visible. It's not as simple as exporting or mailing or maybe yes. So this is something to take into consideration for transboundary movements as well. Then you have with this a summary of the barriers that we identified. Some of them were already explained very well by Maria, and actually the list is a little bit longer in details in the final report. It should be like this. But it's a summary that I want to present and maybe focusing on some of them. The first is about what we saw, this misalignment or these priorities, I would say. On one side, we have regulations where health and safety is the priority, which is clear. Now, MDR is the basis, and this is an important criteria. But emerging environmental or current environmental legislation, of course, strive for environmental sustainability. How do we reconcile both? This is one barrier. No, we need guidance. There is also a common, I think, understanding or challenge identified about the terminology. We use reprocessing according to the MDR regulation, but we have remanufacturing, we have repairing, we have refurbishing. So we just need the guidance. We don't know to one or to the other, but we have to harmonize or explain. Yes, equivalence, for example. We have to really come up with a common understanding for acceptance of what we are doing, increasing the acceptance of our measure. Maybe another one that is could be important is lengthy and costly CE marking and conformity assessment for devices, which was raised in a number of comments to the medical devices regulation last year when we provided feedback. And this was taken up not because of us, but in general. And in the revision, one of the overall aims is to improve the coherence and efficiency. So this is very much appreciated. I mean, really, we saw acceptance in the revisions that have been taken. And now this barrier would, let's say, hopefully, in near future, be less. No, or maybe even in the years to come could be lowered to a minimum. We have mentioned the UDAMET. I think it's not need to expand much more. Maybe Yes, the guidance on standardized collection and segregation practices. Marie introduced a bit the situation in the pilots, but this is not just on the pilots. This is a general call for trying to harmonize, because companies or value chain actors, collectors are doing their task, their job, but we still need that to increase the acceptance or to support the practices by recommending, providing guidance on the standardized practices. There are some samples, some very good sources from ISO standards, from WHO documents as well. This is going to be included in the policy document. And we also talk about the sufficient economy of scale for viable recycling and reprocessing. This could seem like more a financial or economic barrier, but it's related to the fragmentation, because by not having, by having differences in countries, in context, the idea to have hubs or regions that could, at least among them, facilitate and increase the circularity makes it a bit more difficult. There are some regions, if you saw the map, maybe, yeah, regions where they have harmonized regulations, uptake, infrastructure, that would be easier. But in general, regulatory support and some enabling conditions coming top down could help increasing or improving the economies of scale in this case. I think with this, you saw also the columns, the possible regulations that would be concerned when we provide the suggestions, the recommendations, and to finalize, these are the selected recommendations so that will be included. There are more, of course, and they will be explained and elaborated. They need for an integrated risk assessment. So we will not say they should be here in this regulation, in the other. Probably there are other ways, but an integrated risk assessment will guide us, actors, in how to make decisions and based on clear pathways. And this is a top-down recommendation. Then, I already mentioned in the WE directive, this uncertainty that we have on when we have a digital health device and not knowing if it is we or not should be clarified. I think I see it as a low-hanging fruit. We don't know it, but I think this clarification would really increase the volumes of value that can be recirculated in the economies, right? So this is a second point. Then addressing barriers to the cross-border movement of used devices. Then this could be perhaps case by case, a bit checked. What works better in these regions, what not, from where to where the most of the volumes would go. But this is something very important as well. Standardize the contamination protocols. As mentioned, ISO or WHO recommendations documents proves to be very helpful in other regions, and reporting requirements for critical raw materials. Probably linked to the digital product passport, maybe later, but sooner or later this needs to be there. The thing is that with digital health devices and electronics contain, we need this type of information that is not available. And so how can we recover critical raw materials, which was one of the aims, one of the aspects we wanted to optimize in our work, if we don't know what is contained. So this is a learning that we had, and we would like that this is considered when developing these systems, digital product passport systems. And finally, consistent terminology to support implementation. And with this, with DiCE, we work on a glossary with terms and definition that is not publicly available in our website. We can update it. We are discussing if there is a need for one more, several more terms, but we are very pleased to already provide you with this tool, and hopefully, it helps, it serves the purposes. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. So we will move to the last part of this morning's workshop session. I'll invite Emanuele to come as a facilitator for the panel discussion and the panelists as well. So Mariana, Beth, Adrian and Michele, please, you can join us in front. Where's your?
Thank you so much. I don't know if we will need microphones actually. I don't know if
Everybody can
online
hear well,
we
right?
can start without it. If there are problems,
Yes.
then we can have the microphone. So thank you so much for the presentations we received so far. I think it's very rich inputs for the panel debate. Now we'll try to make it a bit more of a discussion. I have four panelists. We have four panelists with us today, which nicely represent four different perspectives, I would say, which came up as absolutely complementary to each other in the dialogue. For the sake of time, I will just present them quickly for you to know a little bit what expertise they have and what they represent, but I will not go into very detailed values. So we have, starting from my left, we have Michele Calabro, who is the Executive Director of EUREGA, which is the European Regional and Local Health Authorities Network, where he leads the Secretariat's work on advocacy, knowledge exchange, and partnerships. He also serves as the co-chair of the European Alliance for Value in Health and is actively engaged in the EU Health Coalition. He has been collaborating and being involved in several initiatives. Then proceeding with Marianna Zarro. You already got to know her before in the interesting and not boring presentation of education. She's a PhD candidate at the Campus Biomedico University of Rome, where she focuses on bioengineering intelligent systems for global health. And she, also with a background in medicine, she also tries to bridge the engineering and the medicine worlds, promoting sustainable and equitable healthcare innovations worldwide. Then we have the pleasure of having Bert Hartog, who is a senior industry executive and innovation leader. He's, amongst many others, also advisory board member of DiCE and also one of the minds behind the DiCE project. He's an international industry expert in clinical research and digital health, also combining background in medicine, a PhD in Utrecht University and biomedicine. And in 2026, he joined TNO, which is the Applied Research Organization in the Netherlands, as a senior business consultant for digital biomarkers. Finally, last but not least, we have Adrian Quesada Rodriguez, who is a lawyer and mediator specialized in emerging technologies. He's based in Geneva as senior manager and lead researcher on ICT law at Mandat International and UDG Alliance, where he leads compliance for multiple international projects on data protection, cybersecurity, and digital health. He has been also extensively involved in standardization processes. So, as you see, we have different perspectives. We have a regional perspective, a hospital perspective, an industry perspective, and also one from law and standardization, which will provide us with nice insights. We have two main questions to touch upon also for the sake of time. One is on the keyword anywhere in Europe, especially on critical raw materials, which is competitiveness, right? The competitiveness imperative we hear, especially when it comes to critical raw materials. And the second one would be on trying to understand what are the policies that can be prioritized among the ones provided by DiCE. Of course, not everything can be done at the same time. And what we saw probably this morning is that there are technical solutions being developed. That's not going to be the major hurdle in front of us. The market will be able to solve it, as he has been able to solve it in many fields, especially nowadays in terms of exponential technologies. What we're missing now and what we need now is those enabling factors that allow us to really scale, and they don't come from one field only or from one regulation only, but they really represent a variety of factors that we try to unpack in our conversation. So I will start from Michele. Michele, coming to the question of competitiveness from a regional innovation and development perspective, where do you see the biggest opportunities for Europe to strengthen the competitiveness of medical device value chains?
Yes, we're doing without the microphone. First of all, thanks a lot for inviting me to the discussion and for the event today. It's incredibly interesting for us at EUREGA and for many of our members. It's a topic where we're trying to dive in deeper now with cooperation, of course, with different projects like in core, and it's really much an excellent learning opportunity, I would say. to begin with. What I wanted to share, first of all, I mean, Eureka is a network of regional and local health authorities, meaning the departments of health from regions across Europe, Catalonia, Basque Country, Italian regions, and even in Belgium, because essentially healthcare it's managed at regional level in many countries in Europe. Actually, about 2/3 of European countries, the competencies of arranging, let's say, the healthcare system from different point of view, it's in the hands of the regions that, of course, needs to look at all the marvelous slides that were presented today in terms of understanding and absorbing the regulation that then trickle down, let's say, from the European level to the national level. So I wanted to give this perspective, first of all, to make you understand where we're coming from, and also to add that from the regional point of view, for us, it's not only about the health system themselves, where, of course, innovation in this sense needs to basically be managed, but at the same time also from the regional development point of view. Because we see more and more that at least at regional level, there's a tentative to match what are the needs of the health system and what's the industry behind it. We've seen it a lot working with also small and medium enterprises with the so-called life science clusters that are present in different regions, essentially in all of them in Europe. And definitely the circularity, it's a topic that we see growing more and more and more. If I have to pick, let's say, one essential element that it's maybe anticipating a little bit as well, picking the favorite recommendation, I think it will touch a lot the complexity and the need of harmonization between all the different levels and between all the different regulation and terminology. This is fundamental because, again, when we look at the regional level, there will be the double need of handling the hospital systems, the healthcare system that needs to essentially come into contact and deal with all the circular aspects from the management point of view. But at the same time, it can be an essential added value, if handled correctly, to increase the, let's say, the attractiveness, call it competitiveness, of the regional ecosystem for medical technologies and beyond. So I think more and more, just to sum up, this better understanding matters like circularity, how to deal with European regulations, how to absorb them at the local and regional level, it will be fundamental because of this double connection between needs, what the region can offer from the regional point of view, and how, let's say, region by region, you can build up competitiveness at European level. Because I think that's how it's possible to do it, not just looking at the European level, but really at the territories and that.
Perfect, thank you so much. And as you said, regions represent ecosystems with exemplify a little bit the possibilities as well of bringing actors together.
Exactly.
And both these intra-regional and inter-regional perspectives that lead into European scale.
Yeah, so and often talking about the same language, it's easier when you start to do it at, say, a smaller level. We know how difficult it is at European.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mariana, I will take advantage of your hospital perspective. And we heard today also a focus on procurement, right, which is of course one of key levels and also a key decision point for hospitals to really implement circularity and sustainability in the processes of the hospital, which have cascading effects, of course, on the whole ecosystem of suppliers, users, and everybody involved. What policies do you think would better enable as well hospitals to combine, as we heard this morning, this environmental and financial perspective when it comes to procurement of medical devices?
So thank you for the question. I think this is a key relevant aspect that we also heard during the presentation this morning on the demand side of things, because most of the time regulation focus on developing, manufacturing, and putting into market products, but they are not focusing on guidance for hospital and also regions to procure the medical device or pharmaceutical products complying with critical criteria for green procurement. In fact, to be honest, to be precise, at the European level, there are green procurement criteria that are set, but are not an obligation to, no one is under the obligation to use the criteria for public procurement. And if I can bring also the Italian perspective in as well, we also have a set of sustainability criteria for public tenders. They are called the criteri ambientali minimi, and they are sometimes used, sometimes not for the public tenders. And this is could be a problem, especially because it is very much fragmented, as also Michele was highlighting. And these, of course, bring the big challenge that we are trying to tackle to make healthcare more sustainable. Of course, if we have different types of perspective and different types of way to tackle this challenge, and it is not a unified way, we will have less force and less strength to tackle this very big challenge. And I think it is very nicely put by a researcher and economist. She's called Mariana Mazzucato, and she explained how to tackle these very big challenges, governments and also regional level, national level, and European level could adopt a mission-oriented approach in a way that at the governance perspective, you set a few priorities, few key priorities that really lead all the efforts towards that priorities. And this could be a very big challenge, like reducing carbon emission by 2030 of 30%. But you don't stop only at putting the priority, but also set policies, regulation, funding opportunities, all in the same direction. And you set a long agenda, so not only 2030, but even longer, so that all the stakeholders involved, healthcare professionals, policymakers, and manufacturer knows that we are going into that direction, and the effort should be participated among all the stakeholders involved.
Thank you so much. I think one key point that you mentioned in hospitals as a key intervention point is because they represent in many cases the users, no? Or at least the ones deciding that the device is reaching the users. And what they can provide to the whole ecosystem is actually the predictability, which is a super important component to actually enable competitiveness, because without predictability, then you cannot really enable the right investments to take place and the necessary clarity as well to be embedded in the decisions that each actor in the value chain has to take.
Absolutely. The predictability is what I was referring to when I was also speaking about like putting inside the agendas all these principles and all these goals that it should be decided at the national level or the European level, and then it trickles down to all the different type of actors, especially hospitals that also do procurement for a lot of medical devices. Through a process that is called health technology assessment. And also this is a very nice point, I think, that could be improved. Now, just a few months ago, it was approved the new regulation on health technology assessment, and it was a bit of maybe a missed opportunity because it wasn't mentioned the sustainability criteria or life cycle assessment. That could be added later on, and a lot of hospitals in Europe already put this kind of criteria inside of their health technology assessment, and it was what's guiding the hospitals to make choices in a different way for medical technologies procurement.
Thank you so much. Bert, I come to you now. In the medical device sector, it's in many sectors actually. competitiveness is strictly connected to scale, right? You cannot be competitive if you don't achieve a certain scale. I mean, that's one of the fundamental economic principles as well. Now, in this field, how do we achieve scale in a way which is both makes sense from both an economic point of view, but of course also from an environmental point of view?
Yeah, thank you. Scale is key. To get to scale, we need to change some current practices that we've really become very familiar with. We are creatures of habit, and we like to continue doing the same thing over and over again and make it maybe a little bit better. But here, when you zoom out, there's a transformation happening. Healthcare is transforming into a different type of healthcare that is not just a little bit different from how it used to be done. It's fundamentally different. People are now monitored at home, where before they had to go to a clinic to receive care and to be monitored based on what the care was supposed to deliver. So remote patient monitoring is very much a new driver into healthcare and design of care pathways. The impact of that hasn't really been thought through in terms of what does it mean for the different actors and the different players in these settings. So when you look at some of the technology that typically come into play for this type of novel transformed healthcare, that's where these digital health devices fit. That's where you see use of individual devices relatively small in size, relatively high, if not very high in volume, relatively low per device in value. So the only way to handle these devices for repurposing, for end of life, is when you reach scale. To make it attractive, and DiCE has demonstrated this in the business model research, to make it attractive for handling these devices, extend their life or recover the components, is to reach scale. Clearly, there is a cross-boundary movement, border movement, that stands in the front. That's an obvious one that needs to be resolved, and maybe in like regional clusters, maybe trans-European. That is one that needs a very hard push, because it's the current hurdles were not designed for this purpose. So that's, in my view, a given. What's new is that there's opportunities for maybe a deposit return scheme. Why not? These devices are not that different from when you look at, for example, plastic bottles. The real big change to get plastic bottles into recycling schemes was the deposit return scheme. So maybe there's something we can learn there. But even bigger, related to an opportunity that's right in our face, is the digital public passport. That can unlock the classification as we, or it can unlock categorization as low risk or high risk contamination, and it can also unlock these circularity practices that the manufacturer will know, but the recycler is not aware of. One of the characteristics of all these digital health devices is that the number of manufacturers is way higher than typically for medical devices. Look at some of these medical devices that we see in hospitals, like MRIs, like scanners. There's only a handful of providers, there's only a handful of manufacturers. For these digital health devices, there are thousands of manufacturers. When they start thinking about eco-design, when they start thinking about circular design, that knowledge could become part of a digital product passport, so that we, the recycling parties, would have access to the knowledge. That would make it much less threatening and much less difficult to start using those recycling opportunities. So when it gets to competitiveness, I think there's a lot of components already in place where we just need to make the connections. Connect the manufacturer knowledge to the recycler activities. Reduce those hurdles for cross-border transportation. And then Europe can become very attractive to show how the transformation of healthcare results in benefits to society, enabled by circularity practices where you don't create environmental issues on the back of it.
Perfect, thank you so much, Bert, and I think these many insights that come from you are absolutely key, and one is indeed this coupling of the physical flows with the data flows, right? Because if you have one but you don't have the other, actually you don't really know if you're going in the right direction and what is the impact that you can achieve at scale.
Exactly right. So we need some kind of dashboard where we know how many devices are out there, what's happening, where are they going, what's the movement, but not just at the device level, at the component level. So we can see. Because one of the things that maybe one of those, like, call it a network effect or call it a spin out. Imagine if all the raw materials currently captured in these devices, if they would become available at the component level. You're talking quantities for Europe that allow entire industries to be built on. So there's a little bit of chicken and egg. There's no demand for many of these raw materials because nobody knows how much there is. Nobody wants to invest in new industries using these components because they don't know how much will be available. So when you look at the quantities that can become available, where you can prove that, you can make investment to build industry on using those components. So there's a little bit of a potential like flywheel here. When the data can show what's possible, investments will become available and industry can follow.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Coming to you, Elgin. We heard before that fragmentation in regulations is, of course, a big problem. What policy actions can go trying to solve a little bit or kind of eliminate this bottleneck at the European level, and also leveraging your expertise on standardization. Of course, policy does not happen in a vacuum, and we cannot expect the policy action nexus to be just a very big, direct, and linear one. There are steps in between and the industries to go through to make sure that the policies can be operationalized in a certain way. So, what policy recommendations do you think are required here to increase competitiveness, taking these elements into account?
Yeah. So, I mean, that question is very interesting in the sense that, from my perspective, one of the main value propositions of Europe is precisely the stability of the regulatory framework, in the sense that you have regulatory frameworks that have regulations that apply across all of Europe. The problem here is the operationalization of those frameworks, right? Because in the end, this happens regardless, say, of the area in which you're talking. Like, if you're talking about GDPR, the different authorities, each of them have their own interpretation of the same law. And everyone knows about this one, but no one knows exactly how to get there, which is what I was mentioning before. The same happens in this route. And I think my perspective as a frustrated lawyer in this sense is that conveying a sense of predictability, which is in principle what we're trying to generate through this stable regulatory environment, is not being achieved at a regional level, maybe because of lack of capacity building, maybe because of lack of standardized languages upon which each region can build their own implementation, their own guidance, their own specificities about how they want to address this. So that is one element. As part of my work, precisely again, GDPR certification, what we did was we tried to generate criteria that would be conveying the maximum common denominator of requirements for this particular topic. And then we followed a modular approach to generating the criteria and to generate extensions and potential areas for implementation. Translating this to the topic that we're trying to talk about, trying to convey, I believe that there's a potential opportunity if we follow this standardization of language idea in the sense of making sure that local regulators and the entities and different policymakers and even within the hospitals and other stakeholders that are going to have to operationalize this can follow standardized procedures whenever possible and just choose from the different options and then have communication pathways
to inform back on this regulation. So basically, we're back to discussing how standardization works at an international level, back to ISO. Like this is principle how it should work. How it actually works is another question, but we could build upon this to address this lack of predictability that can be an issue or a problem for competitiveness.
Thank you. And in our previous exchange in preparation for this panel, you mentioned a very complicated name of a center that just came out recently, but which seems to play an important role.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm not gonna go through this in detail, but basically there was a recent judgment by the the Court of Justice of the European Union, which states that in the case that you're trying to use standards to convey a requirement, the idea is that the entities that are going to have to use the standard are going to be able to access the standard. And this is a big discussion because standards tend to be locked. You have to pay for them. That also means that individuals, people down the street, will not understand what it means when a company says, hey, I'm ISO 27001 certified. And that has a chain of trust problem in the sense that you are more or less discriminating against big players in the industry that will have no problem integrating themselves into the standardization process versus those that are newcomers, that are SMEs, that are just trying to get involved. Maybe it's a small company that want to get involved into the whole recycling business, but they have no idea about how to actually get there, right? So the new judgment is pointing towards a trend, and there's several jurisprudence in this. If you're interested, I can give you the numbers later. Hey, if we have a harmonized standard, if we have a standard that is fundamental, we need to also make sure that this standard is published and easily achievable, like reachable by those that are going to have to integrate this. So I think that it's the same interplay of what we're trying to say. On the technical standpoint, if we're using a standard, you need to be able to have everyone use it. And then on the legal standpoint, if you're using legal language, my perspective, the best possible situation would be you have similar accessibility capabilities for the legal text. Because in the end, like everyone knows, you're all supposed to do it. We're all supposed to comply with the law. But if you cannot, access the law and ingest the law and get it involved into your processes, how are you going to be able to do this? How are you going to be able to identify when there's, clash of requirement between what this law is requesting and what that law is requesting? And then there's a whole discussion on the back end of this about how the policies and policymakers can enhance this process. But I think that that's where we should start.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And of course, this is another very complex discussion that also goes, as you said, beyond the case at hand, but it shows also the complexity in embedding these other layers and these enablers of operationalization into the discussion. Okay, there is not much time. There is one other question I will do to the panelists about what we should prioritize or maybe how we should combine different elements, given that also policymakers have also limited capacity and there are processes to go through to come up with formalization of policies. Before doing that, however, I would like to see if there are a couple of questions in the audience. And if there are, also if you have specifically for some of the speakers, or you want just to address more generally, see one down there.
I have one question to come back to the beginning of the panel on green public procurement. Annika Eberstein, I work for Philips. So the Commission is going to propose a revision of the Public Procurement Directive on the 1st of July. So what's your opinion there on a legal obligation on procurers and public purchasers to actually include green public procurement or circular procurement criteria in that MS?
Thank you, Mariana.
Yeah.
Thank you
for the question. So I think, of course, this is a personal opinion. So that the more central governance we have, better it will be for everyone involved. So if at the European level, they set set of standards and criteria that must be inside of public tenders, and everyone is aware of these standards, and they will stay there for many, many years, then also the industry and the manufacturer will comply with the standards, and the procurement offices will of course, there will be a transition period and everything, but it will be best at the end because everyone will work towards the same direction. And since I think we all agree that the environmental protection, safety and sustainability is one of the key priorities for Europe and especially for the healthcare sector, we must in some way make a big change to make sure that we achieve the goals that we are setting for the future. Thank you.
Maybe just a quick comment. I completely agree. We should really start normalizing this. And we should not talk about this is an additional here, this is an additional there. We should normalize it. And we should respond more like this should have arrived yesterday.
Yeah.
Because we've all accepted that environmental impact is a big thing that will stay with us. So these are all contributions to normalize our ways of handling this. And of course, there needs to be some balance between what effort is required, what help are we getting. But normalizing some of these changes will actually help move faster. And the more people move faster in the same direction, the more impact we will be able to realize. So I think this is a very timely change. We need to understand what best practice looks like. We need to start communicating. There's a data thing. But it's a nice way to normalize some new practice in this changing environment.
Maybe go ahead. Okay. I see one from Ksenia.
Yeah, well, I thank you very much. I quite like very much the part also of the business model because I believe it's part of this normalization that needs to be done. Okay, and I agree that part of the procurement, let's say, directive that is coming, is just because what is happening is that the business model is being broken. I mean, right now, if you see one of the biggest costs is this kind of reverse logistics that was talked today, and actually doing this bio-based or that is to avoid to have the reverse logistics. So somehow it has started a long time ago, as you said. So anyhow, for me, having a high cost is not going to stop any of the companies to do so. Is what it's going to do is to see if circularity scales or not. Not the cost, because at the end it comes to the patients at some round. So having said something like that, how do you see, all this kind of regulation is really competitive? Meaning, I believe all regulations, are considered a cost for many of the companies, However, if the regulation is well done, it's supposed to be what it's supposed to be, this competitive advantage as such, So having looking at that, this at least in my particular view, it has just not been said formally, but has come many years ago and it's there, and now the directives are coming because many of the steps are there. How do you see it from the business perspective? Do you really think the business model is going to change a lot?
Absolutely. Because the incentive is too high. The incentive is that people will receive better care. So when you zoom out, why are we doing all this? We're doing this because we want these digital health devices to become part of care pathways. We want people to receive the benefit of what this technology has to offer. It just cannot be offered, the technology, without taking into account the environmental impact and all of that. So the reverse logistics serve a purpose to achieve a higher goal. And as long as we keep an eye on that goal, and as long as we can quantify that goal, so we can see how much improvement is being made, then consistency in the regulations will show efficiency in achieving that goal. A scaling business model will show efficiency in reaching that ultimate goal faster, allowing more people to benefit. So I think we just need to be very mindful when we talk about why are we doing this. We're doing it to improve care. That's the ultimate goal. And if you can get there faster, meaning standardized regulations, will help. If you can get there faster because you recoup the economics in your reverse logistics, even better.
Thank you so much. Maybe let's go to the second question. Then, if there's something else coming up and we have time, which I doubt, we can get some questions. Otherwise, over lunch. Michael, let's start again from you. I can just put as well up the slide that Sonia shared before with some of the key recommendations coming from DiCE. from based on what you mentioned before, from a regional perspective, what do you think should be prioritized, or also which elements should be combined? That's another point, prioritization, but also finding synergies among different policies.
If I can also maybe connect a little bit to the questions that were made to me, and that's also what we discussed when we look at this in preparation of the panel. Of course, it's the element of clarity in a way, common terminology, and that goes, of course, in synergy with an easier like cross-border movement of things. The more people know exactly what to do, essentially, the easier it will be for everybody to talk the same business and handling healthcare management language. But I think to make it work, and also connecting to what were the question that we received, I think, and also what Adrian was saying, the capacity building dimension, it's also going to be fundamental, because it's almost independently of what the regulation says, if people don't understand it or cannot act on it, it doesn't really matter whether the regulation is going to be positive or negative in one sense. And this capacity building, of course, needs to be done at all levels. Well, medical, for digital medical devices, it was explained pretty well. It's not a bunch of players, it's an enormous amount of players. Small and medium enterprises that maybe are even already struggling now with existing, to take an example, digital regulation, while at the same time hospitals are already dealing with how to harmonize their system with the European health data space, while they were already still delayed on the GDPR. So I think capacity building, it's fundamental. It has to be harmonization, but there has to be capacity building coming after it. And there has to be as well from all of us stakeholders that are working in the sector, an honest conversation, understanding that this is going to be difficult. So it's not going to happen. We're not going to click on the switch and just make it happen. So I think we need to also normalize, again, a very nice term, the fact of that there will be a different velocity of adaptation, but not for this. We need to start really making sure that everybody will fully understand this and speak the same language. Otherwise, we're back to GDPR. And there will be the new data space. You can fix the things now.
Thank you so much. Mariana, you already received a question in this direction, but is this procurement really one of the priorities that we should get out of policy priorities for hospitals? And what elements do you think really we require in that space?
So, as I was saying previously, I think this could be a very big priority, since, of course, there is the two parts of the same medal, let's say, because on one side, you have the manufacturer and the small medium enterprises that are working very hard, pushing very innovative products that will likely improve the quality of healthcare and the quality of care for all people around Europe. But to make sure that this is the case, hospitals and healthcare system need a way to procure the product in a way that is sustainable and safe, and that really make sure that everyone accesses the product in a way that is equitable also. And this is also another principle that I would like to highlight, because we are very lucky in a way that we are in Europe, and we all live in very high income countries. But we cannot forget also about very relevant problems that are interconnected with this, such as medical desertification, and the fact that even in Europe, in rural areas, there are also few problems with medical delivery and access to medical technologies. So that's why I think making stronger procurement choices will lead to better care and also more sustainable care.
But thank you so much, Mariana, also for making this point about equitability on a global level. And it's also something that Europe aspires to do, to really bring this perspective, not only for internal users, but also then to be able to put forward a model that can be used and take advantage of in different parts of the world. So that's really important to remember in the policy discussion as well. Where you were very clear, coupling physical flows, data flows. What else to add?
Well, I think we need to be smart here. The ambition is to reach European level. But that doesn't have to happen in one step. The key is to get to volume fast. So you can start pre-processing, you can start recycling and all of that at scale. But that doesn't have to be European scale. So for example, a country like France, where you've got 65 million people, that is scale. So you can already start there. Countries like in Scandinavia, you may need all 5 countries combined to reach the same scale. So when you start looking into harmonization of some of these, like cross-border transportation, even the classification as maybe you can start at regional level. And maybe that's easier to make first steps. So you can reach scale, you can start creating these opportunities for industry to make use of the recovered materials or to extend life cycle in the region. And from there, you can go up and at some point you can reach Europe. I think the biggest danger here is to aim too high and see nothing happen in the meantime. I think we need to aim for volume and see how we can get to volume. Where some countries, G5 typically, that's already 5 times volume. So I think that's where we can be smart. And then as we're doing this, the digital product passport is given. So let's explore opportunities to extend the information provided through that route. That's maybe where SMEs can actually act faster than big companies. Because SMEs can do decision-making much quicker than big companies. But there may actually be an advantage for SMEs to show how their product is ready for recycling through the digital product passport, which gives them a competitive advantage.
Excellent. And as you said, no one size fits all. Now in scaling as well, and let's make sure to take advantage of the heterogeneity as well of European context to actually enable different models to take off at the same time. Thank you so much, Adrian. From you, what do we prioritize to put together all the pieces of the puzzle that you mentioned before?
That's a really, really good question. I have to say, I like all of the recommendations. I have to start with that. It was really difficult to choose one. The one that went closer to my heart because of my background was the one on addressing barriers to cross-border movement of devices. Because I went through the whole process of trying to facilitate a certification scheme for GDPR compliance, which is basically, same evidently, but the same kind of logic. Like how can we trust whoever is going to be actually performing your processing on the other side? And evidently with materials, you also have to think about the chain of trust of the actual transport that's actually going to handle this from one place to the other. I think that, and again, this was one point that maybe I want to put myself in a devil's advocate position here. We have to think about volumes of scale, but we also have to think about cost. The reality is that some of these actions are quite costly in terms of handling actual human resources, and depending on your jurisdiction, is maybe not as feasible to do unless you have advanced robotics that can be able to handle such things, which increases the cost itself. So I think that the more we can get closer toward proper certification or for traceability, being able to easily convey not just one kind of action or where you're going to be transferring the materials to, but then also clearly stating these were the procedures that were actually implemented, this is why you can trust it, the easier it will be to reach the scales that we need. Otherwise, again, it might happen, but I'm not 100% sure if the incentives might be there, especially considering the, say, regulatory context that might be there. So it was mentioned we are quite delayed in many other compliance areas. And this industry might be very interesting for a developing country or for a say, lower economic capability country, but maybe not so much in areas where it's more focused on other services. That's my perspective.
Thank you so much. I want to thank all of you for the super interesting insights. This will be for me, but I think also for everybody here. We could go on forever, but that's no worry, we will not. I think, now there is, of course, these insights will be feeding into some of the deliverables of DiCE, as Sonia mentioned, the policy recommendations, and also a report from today. But now I give the word back to Els for the final conclusion.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks to the panelists. I will stay here because I took notes so I can summarize a little bit, and I don't have it in my head just yet. But I am just hearing the panel discussion, and I'm combining both the competitiveness and the policy recommendations to close. One of the key things was do not forget the bigger picture, which is providing better care. I think that is essential in everything we do and in all the projects that we have been working for. Very, let's say, streamlined threads that went through the conversation, regional approaches, be it from a legislative point of view, be it from a practical point of view of recovery, and making sure that there's enough ecosystem in those regional hubs, not including only the big industry, but also the SMEs, which are a big part of what we are now looking at, is going to be critical. That's still driving more, let's say, the technology side of things, but also driving demand is something that came out consistently, making sure that this is considered as part of green public procurement, potentially as part of healthcare technology assessment procedures as well, with also a thread that came through. In my opinion, one of the stronger threads was also on the predictability. Predictability in terms of legislation, predictability in terms of expectations around tenders, but predictability also in how that will incentivize people. So having long-term agendas instead of short-term agendas, I think was also a very, very strong recommendation, I would say. What I also particularly liked was the understanding and the capability creation, making that all actors understand what is being requested, what is being proposed, not only from a practical perspective or operational perspective, but getting access to standards, understanding legalese, which is notoriously difficult for many people. But if people do not understand the legalese, they don't know what to do or how to do it. And linked to that, also make sure that the regulations and the legalese is made well, so that people can recognize them and that it's clear, simple, and adds to competitiveness. So I probably forgot a lot, and we have taken records of this, but I think these were very, very interesting insights, let's say. Building trust was a final one that I want to highlight as well. Building trust in the system, building trust in the traceability, so people can contribute and are willing to contribute. If there's no trust, every cycle will break. So I think that trust element through harmonized terminology, harmonized standards is also quite an important one. So in terms of next steps, of course, we will be neatly recording that, and Sonia has been actively typing more in detail than what I had. So we will be including all of this in our final report on the policy recommendations, which will come out in September. So thanks for all the feedback and the interesting insights. And I would also like to welcome you, there we are, to the final event in September, here again in Brussels on the 23rd. It's a full day. Please come, attend. It's gonna be very, very good event. We will have very practical cases here as well, not just slides, but really want to interact. How can you use a circular design guide? What does it actually mean to collect? So not only theoretical approaches, but very actionable things that can go on beyond the 30th of September, which is when we have an official closure of the project deadline, but that doesn't mean that the impact will stop. It has to be well understood that this has to go way beyond 30th of September this year.